My name is Michelle Leith, and I am a certified coach and a trainer here at Productive Learning. And I'm so excited to welcome you to this special masterclass called Three Keys to Make Peace with Food and Your Body. And it's a loaded topic, and we've got a lot to cover today. So we will just dive right in. I'm going to invite you and encourage you to turn off any distractions, right? Silence your phone, shut down the other windows. Just, give yourself the gift of presence, right? You signed up to be here, you committed to be here. So really give yourself the gift of your own presence and attention and participate full out. This is designed to be an interactive experience. We are going to do an experiential process today, so I hope you have a pen and paper handy. You'll need that for when we do the experiential process. And I also just want to share that, what you're going to be learning today is a little appetizer in our food theme, a little appetizer of some deeper work that we do here at Productive Learning in a program that we've created called Nourished. And so before we wrap up, I'm going to also let you know a little bit more about that opportunity in the event that what you hear here inspires you to want to go deeper into this subject matter for yourself. There's a way that we can support you with that. So we'll talk about that at the end, and we'll also leave some time for Q&A. So let's go ahead and dive in. So first, I just want to share why I created this class, right? I put this class together because if you've been challenged with food, eating habits, yo-yo dieting, unwanted body weight, things like that so many women struggle with. If you've been struggling with these things and you haven't been able to resolve it despite trying to do everything right? Despite all the things you've been taught to do, I think it's important for you to know that a lot of what's out there to support women with their eating and weight challenges is incomplete. It's incomplete at best. Sometimes it's downright inaccurate. And I'm really committed to helping women, and that includes everyone on this call. And I even see we have a gentleman with us. Hi. I really want everybody, okay, to have the freedom to nourish yourself on your own terms and the power to create a life that deeply fulfills you, right? So I'm going to use this word nourishment a lot because I think that a lot of where the imbalance is in our culture and in our culture's approach to food and body challenges is that it's all focused on nutrition and science and scientific food properties. It's very much left brain kind of stuff, and it's missing this element of nourishment, like what nourishes us. And there's a lot of interconnections between our relationship with food and other aspects of life, which we're going to explore today. So it's really something that I care deeply about, is that people have the freedom to figure out what works for them, to pursue that, and to feel really good about their choices. And so that's one of the primary reasons that I created this program. But also, if you're here, I want you to know that you're not alone, right? We live in a place where there's a silent epidemic, right? There's this epidemic of dissatisfaction around food and body. Over 95% of women are dissatisfied with their body in some way. There's $76 billion is what we spend in the United States on dieting and the whole diet industry every year. I mean, that is a lot of money. If you interview, Americans, 45 million Americans will cop to being on a diet every year, and many won't even admit or recognize that they're doing that. And yet 97% of people who lose weight on a diet gain it back. And usually they gain back more than they lose. So here we are investing $76 billion in something with a 3% success rate. So for a lot of people, dieting has actually become a way of life. And when I want to kind of clarify what I mean by dieting. So I looked up in the dictionary what dieting is. If you look at Webster's, dieting is selection or limitation of food with the intention of regulating or manipulating weight or health. So it's just any kind of selection of food with some intention of regulating or manipulating your weight or your health. So that can look a number of different ways, right? That could be counting carbs. Maybe you're going paleo, keto, right? Making up rules about what you can or can't eat or should or shouldn't eat. Perhaps you're entering all of your food into some food tracking app, right? There's Noom, there's all these things out there now. There's trying to, quit sugar. There's going on a cleanse, trying to stick to any kind of a plan. All of these things are some form of dieting. They're, or a kind of this common pattern is like frequent cycles of food restriction followed by overeating, right? It's like there's this kind of yo-yo effect that we get into. So that's really what dieting is. That's how dieting lives for us. So even if you don't think you're on a diet, you're not saying, oh, I'm on Weight Watchers, I'm on Jenny Craig, right? It's so much bigger than that. So I'd love to hear from you in the chat. Like, where are you today? How would you, with this definition in mind and some of these examples in mind, are you dieting? Are you on a diet? Are you looking for a new diet that you think will help you solve whatever challenge you're dealing with? Or maybe you're done with dieting, but you just don't know what else to do. Maybe you have, you're here because you've tried and failed so many times at dieting that you've started to wonder if there's something wrong with you, right? Raise your hand if you've had that thought, like maybe it's me. And if so, I want you to know that that's certainly not the case. If anything, what's wrong is the approach, right? And I think another thing that keeps us really stuck on this hamster wheel, yeah, just trying to clean up my eating habits. That's great. Yeah, absolutely. And again, let me just say that there's nothing wrong with any of this, right? It's just, what's it creating in your life? Is it creating more expansion for you? Is it allowing you to be more of your full nourished self? Or is it diminishing you in some way, right? That's the question that we want to answer and then find our own way to. Yeah, Kristen says, I think about it all the time. Yeah, exactly. It's like constantly on your mind, right? Like, what should I eat? What shouldn't I eat? When can I eat again? What did I eat yesterday? Oh no, right? Like we can kind of make ourselves crazy. And part of what I think really keeps us in kind of in stuck in these cycles is shame, right? There's this trap of shame where there's so much out there that's circulating around that actually I'm going to venture to say is toxic, right? Toxic beliefs about food, at least like confusing beliefs about food, right? Like one day, all the, diet and nutrition advice is that, fat is bad for you. Then the next day, fat is good for you. Eggs were out, now they're in, then they're out. Right? It's like you can't keep track. There's so much out there, and a lot of it is based on one person's experience, and it creates a lot of toxic orientation towards food. It's pretty obvious like how many toxic beliefs have been instilled, especially in women, around our bodies and what the ideal body type is for a woman. That's completely unrealistic for 95% of women, right? Our culture is brutal when it comes to uh, judging women's form, judging the female form and the standards that it upholds, and that it gets deeply ingrained in our consciousness and becomes toxic. And when we're surrounded by these things and we start to feel that shame, it causes us to hide, right? It causes us to suffer alone. It causes us to lose trust with ourselves. So again, let me know if you relate to that. Like, do you feel like some of the things that you've learned about your body or bodies in general, or your behaviors with food, or what you have or haven't been able to accomplish, has left you to feel some shame? That's one of the biggest things that gets in our way. And that's one of the things that I'm so committed to here, and why, the coaching program that we have is for women only, is that because this is so shame laden, it's really hard to talk about. And so we're deeply committed to making this a safe space for people to explore, like, what comes up for you around this, because we can't heal when we're hiding in shame. So yeah, and here's the thing, I totally get it. So I talked about, why I created this class, but really why I got into this work was because of my own personal journey. So I lived in that type of shame that I'm describing for like over probably most of my adult life. I mean, for a solid 20 years, I struggled with intense preoccupation with food, chronic dieting, obsession with body image. I experienced a full-blown eating disorder that plagued me for probably, 2 decades of my life to varying degrees. So I've lived through this, and I tried everything that was out there to try to get control of my eating and and try to solve this, and none of it worked, and that led me to feel so much shame. And then eventually, this kind of started for me as a journey to heal my own personal relationship with food. And I discovered some things that were really mind blowing and really helped me look at this whole challenge in a new way. And I went on from that point to study in the field of eating psychology and mind body nutrition. I got certified as a coach. I've studied with master trainers in emotional intelligence and spirituality and neuro-linguistic programming and all kinds of modalities that I was trying to employ to heal my own relationship with food. And what came out of that was some of what I'm going to share today. And that's what I've been doing for the last 15 years with the women and the clients that I work with, is trying to help bring some of these concepts to you so that you have some other choices available to you than just the mainstream dieting advice. So that's kind of how I got here and how we got here. And so let's talk a little bit about what we're going to learn today. So, as promised, I'm going to share 3 keys that can help you transform your relationship with food and your body from the inside out. I think a lot of what's out there is a very outside in approach. And so we're going to think about this from the inside out. Um, I'm also going to talk about or kind of show you that the approach that I'm offering today is a body, mind, and spirit approach, right? So, like, when we only think from the mind, or we only focus on the body, or we only focus on the spirit, like, we're missing, like, there's so much more to us than just one dimension. So I like to think about all 3 dimensions, and I'll kind of point out where those show up along the way. And you're going to get a bonus gift for being here that I'll share with you towards the end of our time together. Everyone that is on the call today has we have something that we want to extend to you as our gratitude for you being part of the conversation. So you're going to learn these things, and I want to just kind of let you know that this may be a bit of a paradigm shift. So I know that we've got some women on the call today that have been part of the Nourish program, or they've been in the productive learning community for a while, and I see some new faces, which is wonderful. But some of what I'm going to share might be counterintuitive to what you've been taught around how to resolve food and body challenges. And so I'm going to invite you to kind of hold a beginner's mind, right? And just stay open to perhaps learning something new, even if it feels like, well, that doesn't make sense. That's not what I've heard. And so I just invite you to bring that beginner's mind, and maybe even listen with a deeper part of yourself, right? Listen to a deeper knowing that might be kind of residing inside of you somewhere, where it's like, kind of that always seemed like that made sense to me, but I just couldn't find any evidence for it out there. So that's another thing to listen for. And then the good news is, I firmly believe, and this is what I hope to convey to you today, is that you can change your relationship with food without changing anything you eat. Like, what if you didn't have to change anything you eat? You just got to change who you are as an eater, and that could make all the difference in the world. So hopefully that comes as good news. So let's dive into key number 1. And this is our body. I said we're going to have a body, mind, spirit approach. Key number 1 is really focused on the body. So I believe that we were all born with a natural, healthy relationship with food. Like, you were born with this. Think about babies and children. If you ever look at little kids, like, they're not worrying about how many macros are in the baby food. They eat when they're hungry, and they stop when they're full. Sometimes they crave things that their body needs. Sometimes they learn the hard way that too much ice cream gives you a tummy ache, but they're not beating themselves up about it. They just course correct, right? They're like, well, I'm not doing that again. So we kind of came in with this natural, healthy relationship with food, but it's just gotten confused and covered up by a lot of negative conditioning, and even well-intentioned parents, right? I don't know how many of your parents wouldn't let you, like, leave the table or get dessert until you ate 3 bites of the food. Like, my mom was that, like, you can't stop until you eat 3 bites. Whether or not my body wanted that food, or whether or not that tasted good to me, or whether or not it was even, we just get kind of programmed to disconnect from this natural, healthy awareness, this body awareness that we have. Another thing that can help you kind of remember that is, think about, maybe there was a time in your life where you were just, like, really cruising. You were engaged in lots of things that had you stimulated, and you weren't thinking about food. Maybe you weren't worrying too much about your weight. You were eating when you were hungry, or just kind of, it wasn't top of mind. And maybe you even noticed that you lost weight without even trying, right? Have you had that experience? Like, or just you felt better for some reason and you weren't all worried about the dieting and what to eat. It was natural, right? And so it's like that's there, it's still in you. And so the good news is that when you start to focus on, the right things or different things, I think we can reconnect with that part of ourselves, that natural, healthy relationship with food. However, the conventional approach, right, if you think about most of what's out there to help us when we're not happy with what's going on with food and body, most of it's focused on what to eat or what more likely what not to eat, right? Well, here's the things that someone has identified as bad for you or not good food or whatever. So it's focused on what to eat. It kind of sets up this paradigm that there's some kinds of food that are good and some kinds of food that are bad. Where we go with that quite often is that if I think a food is bad and I eat that bad food, we'll even generalize that to ourselves. I'm bad, right? Like, how many times have you said to one of your friends, like, oh, I was so good yesterday, or I was so bad yesterday, that cheesecake, right? So we will generalize this good and bad food thing to ourselves as an identity. The other thing that I want to point out about the conventional approach is that it puts us in this position of attempting to achieve and maintain often unrealistic ideals, like as if you're never going to eat a cookie again, but also defined by an external source, right? This is some source outside of you and your body that's telling you what you should or shouldn't eat, regardless of what your body's telling you about what it needs, what it agrees with your body. A great example of this I had with a client was she was forcing herself to eat kale because, she was trying to be a good eater, a healthy eater, and she read that kale was this, superfood, and she hated it. I mean, it's almost like making her gag. And so there's science that actually shows when we eat something that's unpleasurable, we don't even digest it very well. So there's so much around this where it's like she was putting her power outside of herself, not listening to her own body, right? So the external source is a lot of this conventional approach. We're looking for someone else to give us the answer, the magic pill, and we're overriding our own body wisdom. But really what all this does is it sets you up to control your appetite, right? It's all a setup that what you need to do in order to get the results you want is control your appetite. Even the eat less, exercise more thing. I mean, yes, they got the exercise in there, and exercise is great for you. It's all good. But controlling your appetite is the name of the game. So I want you all to do a little exercise with me just for a moment. And just take a big deep breath in. Fill all the way up and then hold your breath. And keep holding it. Hold it. Hold it a little longer. Maybe keep holding until you just can't hold it anymore, right? And then what happens? You have the urge to take a big sigh in, right? You're like, I gotta get my breath, right? That's because breath, just like appetite, is a survival instinct. It is a force of nature. And so you can never win at the controlling your appetite game because you're always gonna have an appetite. And what happens, like just like when you try to control your breath and hold your breath, if you've been controlling your appetite and then suddenly you let go, for a lot of people, there's like this intense urge to like eat everything in sight, right? If you've gone all day without eating, you've probably experienced that. Or perhaps you've been on a diet and then you're like, I can't handle it anymore, and then you binge, right? So there's this rebound effect that happens when we try to suppress a natural survival instinct. And that's why appetite control, one of the reasons that appetite control doesn't work. Another reason that appetite control doesn't work is that it positions food as an adversary, right? So when you have this idea that food is either good or bad, and I'm either good or bad, and I'm resisting certain foods, even though one part of me wants them, you're thinking about food as something that is adversarial to you, or perhaps even an enemy. And the thing is that your brain cannot tell the difference between a real or imagined threat. So if you're coming to something, if you're coming to the table with viewing food as an adversary, it's as if to your body and your physiologic responses, it's as if you are coming face to face with an actual threat. Like, so my cookie bear analogy here. So that may seem a little extreme, but let me just talk about what happens when your body is in a fight or flight response, right? So we're talking about fight or flight. When you're in fight or flight, which it's called the physiologic stress response, all kinds of things are happening in your body. And these are some of the functions that happen when you're under this kind of stress. Number one, your digestion is slowed down. Number two, your body produces more cortisol and insulin, which are hormones that signal your body to absorb nutrients and energy out of the bloodstream and hold it up into the body tissues, right? So this is what actually has our body like hold on to weight. It wants to grab onto weight. So cortisol and insulin is elevated. You are being signaled to store more fat, kind of as a function of those hormones. You're building less muscle. You are burning fewer calories. So the stress response will reduce your thermic efficiency, which is calorie burning capacity. You're reducing nutrient absorption because you're not digesting as actively as you might otherwise. And it has also been shown this physiologic stress response, especially when you're in even like a low level chronic physiologic stress response, which so many of us are in, whether or not we're worried about food, we just live in a culture that has us like living under chronic stress, will signal, it will be associated with increased cravings for sugar and carbohydrates. So here you are trying to do all these things right, to eat healthy and do all the right things. But if you are having any degree of thinking about food as an adversary or trying to control your appetite, and there's a fight or flight to any degree, it's having an impact on how your body's even processing what you're up to. Even if you don't think that you think about food as an enemy, so maybe that doesn't relate for you, there are other things that cause the stress chemistry, such as just general calorie restriction will put the body into a starvation response, which will slow down your metabolism seriously. Over exercising can signal a stress response in the body. Like the body's like, I can't repair fast enough, and now you're making me work again, right? So this can contribute. Fast eating will actually signal a stress response in the body. And so many of us are racing through our meals. Eating when we're distracted or multitasking, not really being aware while we're eating, just kind of checked out, not paying attention, that will contribute to stress chemistry. Double whammy, rushing through a meal that you're stressed while you're eating, right? I'm working at my desk. I'm trying to get this deadline. I'm eating my lunch at my desk. I'm not paying attention. That will create a stress response in your body. Eating with people who stress you out. The dysfunctional family dinner, right? You all had those. And then emotional stress can have the same effect. I want to really emphasize this. Emotional stress can have the same effect as on your body as an actual threat, as an actual bear, right? Anxious, guilty, critical thoughts. So let's say you're eating the ice cream and you're judging the bejeebers out of yourself while you're doing it. You're creating stress chemistry in your body, which means that you're actually much more likely to have that ice cream be a weight gaining element than just a pure pleasure enjoyment, right? So this is kind of sadly how a lot of us are operating in life, just because we're unaware and because our culture is conditioned us to do this. So here's kind of the bottom line. I'll just reemphasize that you could be eating the healthiest meal on the planet. You could be doing everything right. But if you're eating it with any degree of anxiety or rushing or hurrying, sometimes we're hurrying through something we're eating because we feel guilty that we're eating. Like, let me get it over with fast. You're unlikely to digest and metabolize it as well as you could, and you're actually kind of working at odds with your body. And that can create, just being on that hamster wheel. So let's do a little reality check together and just think about, just take a moment to kind of think about, what was the last thing you ate? What was the last meal you had, or the last thing you ate? Whatever that is, doesn't matter. And then just take just do a little self-reflection on what were the conditions around that. What were the thoughts, and what were the conditions? Were you paying attention? Were you feeling anxious or guilty about what you were eating? Were you stressed out, rushing around the car? Just notice. Again, no judgment, just noticing. And then with what you now know, how did those conditions support or diminish the way that you perhaps metabolized that particular food or that particular meal? And I'd love to hear any insights in the chat. Like if there's anything you're like, well, it doesn't really apply to me, that's great. Cool. Post that. If it's like, oh, yikes, uh-oh. Let us know. Let us know. And because, again, this is the shame-free zone, right? So it's like when we can share this with others and know that we're not alone. I'd love to know like what this brings up for you or what kind of insight this brings for you. Yeah, it is lunchtime. Fair enough. Fair enough. Yeah, I know, right? It's almost like, why do we do this at lunchtime? It was a test. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, I scarfed out a meal to get to this call in time. I love it. That's great. I crammed a bunch of cheese and crackers into my mouth before we started this because I usually eat lunch at 12 and I'm like, oh my God, I wait till 1:30. Anyway, it's all good. But yeah, it's great. Just noticing, right? Awareness is power, right? Awareness gives us choices. All right. So let me just summarize this key number one, right? This is our body key. And this is that, if you only focus on what to eat or what not to eat, you're missing out on a big opportunity. When you shift the focus from what to eat to how you're eating, right? Then you have a lot more power available to you. So this involves like understanding the body mind connection, really understanding how to partner with your body in a new way so that whatever you happen to eat, you can get the most benefit from it, you can get the most pleasure from it, and you can have the least negative outcome from it if it's something that you don't think is, wouldn't be your top choice. This to me gives me so much freedom because I'm like, oh, it just gave me so much freedom in my own journey to know that like if I'm coming to the table in a way that supports my body and my metabolism, I don't have to stress as much about whether what I'm eating is right or wrong. It's just coming to the table and being present. All right. Key number two. This is our mind-related key. So you might have heard the saying, you are what you eat, right? Raise your hand. You know that saying, you are what you eat, right? This is the idea that, what you put into your body can, creates the constitution of your body. So if you eat healthy things, you're going to have a healthy body. If you eat junk food, right, that's making you up. And so again, I get it. And there's some truth to that. Sure. Yeah. The more nutrient dense food that we ingest, the more nourished our bodies are going to be. But it's only half of the nutritional story. And I'm going to suggest that we flip that a little bit. And I want you to consider that you eat what you are. You eat what you are. So let me give you an example. Let's just say that you label yourself as an emotional eater, a binge eater, stress eater, food addict, sugar addict, lazy, no willpower, fat, etc. You could also take this on the other hand, like I'm a clean eater, I'm a vegan, I'm health conscious. We love to label ourselves, right? Like humans just love to label. I don't think we can ever really escape that. The problem is if we're labeling ourselves unconsciously, our mind will love to grab a hold of that and use that to kind of unconsciously dictate our behavior. And so in order to kind of unpack this, we're going to use a mind model that we use in all of our programs at Productive Learning. It's called our TFAR model. So if you're new to us, the TFAR model stands for thoughts, feelings, actions, and results. So let's just say you have a thought like one of these labels, right? Like say I thought I'm an emotional eater, or let's just use the example, your thought is I have no willpower. A thought is going to produce feelings. So when you think I have no willpower, that's going to invoke some kind of feeling in you. Now, maybe that feeling, if for a lot of people, if you think I have no willpower, the feeling might be a feeling of sadness, depression, hopelessness. It could be the opposite. It could fire you up and make you motivated. But again, we'll just use the example that I would say probably the most common is you tell yourself, I have no willpower. And the feeling that comes with that could be something like, well, then, yeah, like I'm no good. I'm not enough. I'm weak. That will then contribute and fuel an action. So from that thought and then the associated feeling, what action does that lead you to take, right? In many cases, that might be, well, why bother? Why even try? I'm just going to go ahead and eat the whole bag of Oreos. Because obviously I have no willpower and I feel crappy about myself. And so let me just reinforce that. So then that creates a result. after the action comes a result. Maybe you feel really sick. Maybe you feel really gross. Maybe you weigh yourself the next day and you see a number you don't like and you're like, oh gosh, I know I did it again. So that result then will create a new cycle of thoughts and feelings, right? So that this is the cycle that we get on. And this can go in positive and negative directions, right? We're using an example of perhaps a thought, feeling, action, and result that's unwanted. But the problem with these labels is when we identify ourselves, and we when I say we eat what we are, when I say I am an emotional eater, those labels come with sort of a code of behavior, right, that goes along with them, and they become part of our identity. And the subconscious mind will do everything in its power to preserve your sense of identity, even if that identity is making you miserable, right? Even if that identity isn't one that you want or that you consciously chose, every time you reinforce it with your thoughts and your feelings, it's just reinforcing the behavior cycle that goes with that identity. So, right? What I want to do is take a moment to do a little experiential process. And we're going to use that TFAR model, and I'm going to give you guys an opportunity to kind of work this through for yourself with, you know, with the model that I just used. So I want you to think about what's a label or an identity that you associate with for yourself that you've had about yourself when it comes to food and body, and what brought you here. Um, and if it's not specifically a food or a label, it could just be a thought. Like, what's a common thought that goes around and around in your head? So we're gonna do, you can kind of see all the prompts here. So what you're gonna do is first you're gonna think about what's the identity or label that you want to work with, and then journal out what are the thoughts that go along with that identity, and what are the feelings that go along with that identity. What actions does that lead me to take? What are the results that that gives me? And then what are the new thoughts and feelings that come in response to those results? And I don't know, Jamie, if we have a little music or something, but we're going to take, 5 minutes or so to do this. Let's take about 2 more minutes. Does that feel like enough? Yeah, okay, cool. About 2 more minutes and then we'll wrap up and move on to the next step. All right, 1 more minute. All right, let's go ahead and wrap up. And then of course, if you're not done, then I invite you to kind of just continue to work with this after after our call. So hopefully you got through kind of like the current cycle of thoughts, feelings, actions, and results, and then new thoughts and feelings, and kind of notice how that loops you in a certain way with an identity or a label that you've been associating with. And so the kind of homework for you to take away from this, like to work on later, is this last bit on the slide, which is, without that label, right? Like if you were to lay that down or peel that off, what alternative thoughts, feelings, actions, and results could be possible, right? What else could be available to you if you set that label down or if you stopped, associating with it? And that really gives you an opportunity to kind of consciously reframe some of these identities that we hold about ourselves. I like to think about like these identities are so, they're like very fixed, right? Like when we have a sense of, I am this, it's a very fixed mindset when you think about it. And again, that's where like there's this code of behavior that goes with that, and they're like sandwiched together. What you can do with that is you can reframe that in a way and say, well, how can I make that more open-ended, more dynamic? Not trying to lie to yourself with like an affirmation that you don't believe, but like I'm an emotional eater could be reframed into something like I'm learning how to nourish myself, right? I'm learning how to nourish myself when I feel emotionally challenged. I'm just in a process. I'm a human that's on a journey, right? Or I'm lazy becomes I'm learning how to manage my energy. Or I'm overweight, here's a great reframe. I've got untapped reserves of personal power, right? My mentor used to say that unwanted excess weight on the body is unused personal power, right? Where do we sit on our power and then it builds up in the system, right? So really fascinating way of thinking about it, but I actually think there's a lot of truth to that. Undigested life experience or unexpressed personal power. Interesting, right? So anyway, so that's one of the things that that it's really, really important when it comes to transforming your relationship with food is learning about how your mind is working either for or against you, right? We can't escape the mind. It's a big part of who we are, but we don't need to let it be our master. We can start to have it be our servant, right? So key number 2 is really to reshape and kind of consciously redesign, understand who you are as an eater. Who have you been as an eater? Who do you want to be as an eater? Uncover those unconscious identities and beliefs that have been driving your choices, because with awareness comes choice. And the rub here is that when we become more aware of a pattern and we want to change it, awareness is wonderful, but we'll sometimes say at productive learning, awareness is the booby prize, right? Because you still have to grapple with the inevitable resistance that comes with making any change. Our subconscious mind wants to maintain the status quo. And so even though we might know there's another choice available to us, it doesn't mean it's easy to make it. Sometimes we have to understand what the payoff has been to the current state, to the old choice. There's a payoff to everything that we do. So you have to get under the hood and understand what those payoffs are, and then have the support around you from other people that are able to see, help reflect back to you your blind spots, that can hold you in your power. You need support to help you get through that inevitable resistance that comes when we start to venture into that territory of change. So that's our key number 2. So key number 3, this is probably one of my favorites. This is the key that I like to think of as having as the association with spirit, right? So we've got body, mind, and now we're onto the spirit. This has to do with the issue of hunger, right? You've learned how, the conventional approach and kind of hyper focusing on food can kind of set you up for unwanted results. You've learned how powerful the mind is. And so through my years of personal experience, professional experience, working with hundreds of women now, probably, what I've found is that the root cause of our challenges with food and body is often a sign or an indicator that we're out of balance with other hungers, right? Our relationship with food is very symbolic. And so there's this association with uh this question of like, how do you relate to hunger in general, right? If you've been on the path of appetite control for so long, right, this focus on controlling your appetite actually disconnects you from your hunger, right? We've been taught to turn it off. No, I don't want to have a hunger. I don't want to have an appetite. I don't want to have a hunger for that chocolate cake because that's not safe, it's not good, whatever. Let me disconnect from my hunger. So it's so hard to relate to hunger in general when we've been so preoccupied with controlling our appetite. It makes us disconnect from it. And hunger isn't just physical, right? I'm talking about emotional hunger, right? We have physical hungers, we have emotional and spiritual hungers. So it's hard to identify sometimes. And this is one of the things that I hear very frequently when I ask women, what are you really hungry for? One of the common answers I get is like, I don't know. I'm confused. I don't even know how to answer that. I don't even know how to access that, right? We become so disconnected from our appetite that we can't even name it. Can't even name what we want. Or maybe we think we know what we want, but it's actually really something that someone else gave to us, right? It's someone else's dream or desire. These are some of those challenging experiences that I think a lot of us can relate to, where maybe you really pursued something, you pursued a goal, you wanted something and you got it and you feel unfulfilled. And it's like, I did the things, I got the job, I climbed the corporate ladder, I got the promotion, I got the title. Why do I feel so empty? It's like, well, maybe if you really trace that back, it wasn't your dream to be on that career path. It was your parents' dream for you, right? So there's lots of ways in which we might take on an expectation of someone else and pursue that as if it's a hunger, but it's actually not really true for us. Or we don't dream big enough. We don't even ask for what we want. We're afraid to even name it. Maybe you know what you want, but you don't even want to say it, or you play really, really small because there's a risk associated with that. There's a risk associated with naming our hunger. And the risk can be, number one, that I might not get it. Number two, that I might have to do something about it. I'm not sure I'm prepared for what it's going to require of me, right? So there's these ways in which we just kind of trip over ourselves when it comes to being in right relationship with our hungers. And I just want to name that we all have hungers. We all have them. Here's an example, or just a bunch of examples of some universal hungers, right? Universal things that I think all people can relate to, that at some point or in time, or maybe all the time, we all could relate to having a hunger for some of these things, right? Emotional connection, acceptance, self-expression, creativity, purpose and meaning, physical contact, physical affection, maybe just peace and quiet. Gosh, maybe I'm just hungry for some time to myself. If you're raising a family, like how nice is that? And so all these things are valid, right? All of these hungers are super, super valid and they're important. And yet when we're disconnected from our hunger and we don't even know that, first of all, we can't even recognize them, we don't hear them, we've blocked them out. We certainly aren't then able to try to nourish them. Or sometimes we're actually kind of trying to get some of these things, but not even really registering that they're happening. So a lot of it has to do with our presence and our awareness. So these are some universal hungers, and I would love to know in the chat, like which of these really land for you right now? Like if you look at something on this list or something else, what does this spark for you? What's something that you're hungry for in your life right now? Something that would really feed you, would really nourish you, that's non-food. Let me see. Yeah, emotional connection. Same. Self-expression. Yes. Rest. For sure, Diana. Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Right. All of these things. Yeah, to do something really meaningful. Yeah, I love that you said that because in the 15 years that I've been doing this work, I actually noticed a pattern in the three most common hungers that emerge when we create the space for you to actually drop in and feel these things. So I want to say, first, let me say that when you're preoccupied with food, when you're on the kind of the constant hamster wheel of like, oh my gosh, I got to control my eating, I'm trying to lose the weight, I'm da 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 da, you don't have the space, you don't have the mental space or even the emotional or spiritual space to drop in and really hear what you're hungry for, right? It's like, who has the time? Your energy is hijacked. But when you create the space by getting into right relationship with your body, learning how to partner with your body, learning how to quiet the mind, starting to kind of unravel some of those unconscious programs that keep you on a loop, it's like something can open up where then you can go, huh, wow, what deeper down am I hungry for? Where maybe it's been driving me to reach for food as a symbolic substitute, right? What is it about the ice cream why do I keep wanting to have ice cream every night? Well, gosh, let me think back. What's the history of me and ice cream? Well, grandma used to, every time I went to my grandma, she always gave me a bowl of chocolate ice cream. Cool. How did that make you feel? Special. It made me feel like everything was okay and someone had my back. Wow, that's really interesting. What does that point you to now? Like how's the ice cream kind of give, what's in what ways is that hunger there for you right now that you maybe haven't recognized? So how smart of your system to want the ice cream to get the feeling, right? But the feeling was what was driving it, right? So when we create the space, we can hear some of these deeper hungers. And the three most common hungers that I've seen bubble up for women when they get the space is just a general hunger for self-love and acceptance. We're so hard on ourselves. And if we've gotten hard on ourselves because of the way we look, because of the way we've been conditioned, we've been judging our bodies, we've been disconnecting from ourselves, we've been, outright mean to ourselves in our heads, right? We sometimes are just so deeply hungry for our own self acceptance and self love, self compassion. Another one that I see really commonly is a hunger for intimacy and connection. I think someone put in the chat emotional connection. Every single human being on the planet needs a core need is intimacy and connection. So whether that's in the context of a relationship, maybe you're struggling. I've seen women struggling to get the intimacy they crave in the context of a relationship, or they don't have a relationship or someone that they feel really deeply connected to and they're longing for that, right? Or the third one, purpose and meaning, right? Really, I saw that in the chat a couple times too. Like, what is it all about? What am I here? What would deeply fulfill me where I feel like my life has meaning? And when you think about it, with this climate that we live in, where there's so much preoccupation with food and body, the whole quest to get our diet right has become a purpose for a lot of us. Like if you think about where your energy goes and when your attention goes, it's become our life purpose to try to fix our relationship with food or our body. Someone put it in there. I think about food all the time. Yeah. So what could you do with all the life force energy that you currently spend focusing or worrying or stressing about food in your body if you were to reclaim that? Like, where could you direct that could be so meaningful? It's a big question. And it's a scary question because again, there's responsibility that comes with that. With awareness comes choice, but it also comes with responsibility. And sometimes we don't know if we want to step into that or if we're ready to step into it, or we don't feel like we know we're empowered, we have the tools to do it or even the permission to do it. So these are some of the most common hungers that I see. that emerge for women when they start to get the space. But all those hungers can be true, and they can all be hungry. You can be hungry for all these things at the same time, right? But what it really comes down to is giving ourselves permission to identify and start to feed some of those deeper, truer hungers. And understanding like why you reach for what you reach for with food. Like, is there something underneath that there's an association, right, between what you are hungry for deeply inside and what we're reaching for externally that maybe is symbolic of that. Exploring what you're really hungry for in life, and then empowering yourself to nourish those hungers. So that's our third key. So let me just kind of recap what we've learned. You've learned that trying to control your appetite puts you at odds with your body physiologically. You've learned that, how you eat and who you are as an eater matter just as much, if not more, I'm going to venture to say, than just specifically what you eat. And finally, that only focusing on food, really has the potential to leave you perpetually hungry. And I just want to add one more thing, and that is, I'll frequently come across a client who will say, "Well, actually, everything's great in my life. I've got my career's going great. I've got a partner that adores me. Like, I don't feel like I'm hungry for something. It's just this one thing. Like, this is my Achilles heel, my nemesis. I just haven't been able to fix this problem that I have with food in my body." And I'm going to suggest that in that case, it's not a hunger issue, but what I would call a hiding issue. And that is sometimes the current state that we have is a way of protecting us from something that doesn't feel safe. So if that is you, perhaps you haven't given yourself permission to have it all, right? Like, if I had it all, something about that's not safe. So I'm going to keep myself just a little bit under the radar by repeating this challenge in this problem area over and over and over. And these are the types of things that we dive into in the Nourished program. It's really, like I said, getting under the hood of what's and with total love and self-compassion, right? Like, non-judgment. Like, what is it that I haven't felt? What am I hungry for, or what am I longing for that I haven't given myself permission to really have? Right? And then how can I access that permission? How can I unwind the programs that have kind of kept me in this loop and step into something different for myself? So I just offer that up there because I know that comes up sometimes when we're talking about hunger, and you could have a wonderful life and be so fulfilled in every area, but this, and that's where I'm going to suggest there's something else that would be worth looking at. So that's what you've learned, and it sounds simple, right? It's like, oh, okay, cool. All I need to do is partner with my body, and and just like, figure out my mind, and fill my hungers. It sounds easy, but if it's so easy, we'd all have done it by now, right? So these are some of the common obstacles that can get in the way. Number one, the dieting mentality is deeply imprinted. Every magazine, everywhere you look, every podcast, right? It's all around us all the time. It's really easy to rebound, even, if you're trying to do something different and then you kind of get thrown off balance and you feel insecure. It's really easy to just default back to, okay, I guess I better go back on a diet because it can help us feel like we've got some control. Perhaps you haven't given yourself permission, right, to have your hungers filled. Something in your history has conditioned you to think that it's not okay for you to have what you want. You're just missing some essential tools, right? And, maybe there's boundaries. Maybe, we tend to be overgivers. Women tend to be overgivers. We will deplete ourselves so much that at the end of the day, yeah, it does feel like ice cream is my only reward. It's like all I got. It's all I got. I've given everything I have to everybody else. So maybe there's some tools around boundaries or something that would really support you in having more balance in your life, so that you're not coming from that place of extreme hunger, like a emotional hunger. Maybe there's some communication skills that would help you have better intimacy. There's emotional agility, learning how to be more compassionate with your own feelings and self-soothe in alternative ways besides soothing with food. And I want to just throw in another little tidbit here, which is, if you relate to that soothing with food, congratulations, you're human, right? We all do it. When we were born as babies, we were held and fed at the same time we were being comforted. So there's a biological wiring that says food equals comfort and love. So please do not judge yourself if you relate to that, because that's how we started out. That's how we started out. Um, and then, as I mentioned, another obstacle could be that some part of you is actually not okay with you actually getting what you want. The current state has a higher perceived payoff than the alternative state. And then the final reason, of course, is that it's really hard to do it alone. It's just not easy to do this kind of work alone because we can't see ourselves and it gets scary. And we have this, a lot of us have the shame. And so support is so, so important, whether that's a trusted friend, right? A community like Productive Learning, a coach or a therapist, like having someone to support you on the journey makes all the difference in the world. And that's one of the reasons that I created the Nourished Essentials course, and that we've been running this course at Productive Learning for the last several years. It's actually kind of part course. We call it a group coaching program. It's got some curriculum, so it's not exactly a workshop, and it's not exactly just a coaching thing. It's a little bit of a hybrid. So basically, what our Nourished Essentials program includes is it's an intimate small group, women-only format. And again, we keep it women because especially when we get into the territory around body image, very deep, very intimate, very tender stuff, right? I haven't talked a lot about body image in this call, but body image is a big component of the Nourish program, and it's very sensitive subject matter for a lot of us. And so it's just important to me as a leader and as a coach to create a space where we can explore these things and feel completely safe in the presence of other women. So it's an intimate group, women only format. It includes a 12-week curriculum. So if you were to consider Nourished, if you haven't already been part of it, I know some of our people on here have already done it. You get I created all the modules, all of the curriculum is created by me, and then the groups are facilitated by my partner in this work, our senior trainer, Betty Jo Waxman, who's also on the call. Betty Jo is leading our current Nourished Essentials groups and doing all the coaching. So it's one-on-one coaching every week on a weekly call with Betty Jo, but all of my content and modules that you get access to. There's video, there are video lessons, there are processes for you to do. As I mentioned, there's weekly group coaching with Betty Jo. And then you have an option even from there to continue on to Nourished Mastery. So there's a distinction here. We have Nourished Essentials, which is like getting you the foundations of all of how to transform your relationship with food and your body. And when we did this the first time with our first few groups, so many people were like, wait a minute, I want to keep going. Like, there's so much more. Like, we're just scratching the surface. And so we created a level 2 course, basically called Nourished Mastery, where you can continue the journey with me in more of a one-on-one container with me, or a one-on small group container, I should say, with me. But because this is a lifelong journey, right? Your relationship with food in your body is the longest relationship you'll ever have. Like, just let that land for a minute, right? Think about all the people that will come and go. But when it comes to feeding ourselves and being in relationship with ourselves and our body, that's it. Like, that is the longest term relationship. So anyway, I look at this as a lifelong journey, but the good news is once you get through Nourished Essentials, it starts to open up and become a less painful journey than it might have been in the past. And more a journey of like really just cool self-discovery. So that's just a little bit about our Nourished Essentials program. If that's of interest to you, we'll certainly give you more information about how you can learn more about that. But I do want to let you know that everyone on the call today, as a thank you from us, has a gift coming your way, and that is a complimentary 30-minute coaching session. So you can, maybe unpack what we explored on this call today. You can use the call for really whatever you want, but what I would suggest and what you can expect to come away with is some more clarity on maybe what is it specifically that's going on in your relationship with food in your body that where you could get a little bit more clear about maybe what's going to be one of the levers that you could pull to create a change, right? Maybe you could come away a little bit more clear on what a next step could be for you, whether that's joining our program, whether that's something else that you're up to. We want you to have the benefit of the coaching call just to get a little bit more value from this time together and help it point you in the direction that you need to go. So, Jamie, can you post in the chat? Oh yeah, there you go. She did. If you see the chat, we have a link in the chat for your bonus, and that's where you can get a chance to talk to Betty Jo. And if you've never talked to Betty Jo before, please just take the call with Betty Jo and talk about whatever it could be any other topic. She is incredible. She's one of our senior trainers, one of our most brilliant coaches. Like I want a 30-minute call with Betty Jo. So you will have an insight. You will have an aha in spending a little bit of time with her. Betty Jo, is there anything that you want to say to the group about, your experience leading Nourished and like what you would offer in terms of, I don't know, any guidance for the women on our call today about how you think about this journey?
Yeah, of course. I always have something to say. So thanks for the invitation.
Yeah.
Hello, faces I haven't seen for a while. It's really lovely. And some names. I don't see your faces, but I remember you and I know your name. I'll just say briefly that maybe my greatest joy in leading the Nourish program has been guiding people through these it's like different perspectives and watching the light bulbs go on. Also the opportunity to personalize the material through this small group structure. There are 4 or 5 people max in our small group. And although everyone is unique, the overlap is just mind-blowing and how much we're learning from each other. One of my strong suits is creating safety. So I'm just fascinated by how quickly everyone is willing to dive in and just really look deeply and like I said, personalize all the amazing material that they get in the lessons and the videos and the structure that you provided, Michelle. So yeah, it's a delight. It's an honor to get to lead these, and anyone who wants that personal one-on-one 30-minute coaching call, what's my next step, and is this a good fit for me to do Nourished, we'll look forward to seeing your name show up on my calendar. Thanks.
That's awesome. Yeah, and there are a few things. Thank you, Betty Jo. There are a few things that I just want to make clear are really kind of make this different, I think. Is number one, there's no food plan, there's no food prescriptions, there is literally nothing in here that is about what to eat. You're going to learn a little bit more about how to eat, right? Like partnering with your body. But this is not a diet group. This is not a food plan, right? Like if that's something that you want to explore, like again, we're going to help you really get clear on why you want to do that, what you're expecting from that. If that's the right choice for you, that's all great, but that's not what these particular groups are about. This again is really about who you are as an eater. And to me, that's the secret sauce, right? That's the secret sauce. And whatever else you're doing out there, if you're not also tuning in to some of these aspects, you may be again missing some huge opportunity and perhaps not even getting where you really want to go. So anyway, and again, thank you for pointing to the personalization too, because for those of you who are new to productive learning, one thing that we're really committed to is helping you find what's right and true for you, right? Like I have an opinion, I have a perspective, but that's not something that I'm going to assign to you, right? Like we're very deliberate about that. So there's going to be things on offer and you may pick it up and go, yeah, this works for me, or this is true for me. And others, no, that's not true for me. That's what we want, right? We don't want you to do it our way. We want you to find your way. And so that's really our philosophy. So that's what we're here to help you with. And so a lot of this can be very personalized and there's no right or wrong way to do any of it. So let's go ahead and I think we've got some time for Q&A. I wanted to leave some space for questions. So let me shift to that.
I have something I'll share.
Yeah, sure. Hi.
Hi. I'm currently taking Nourished, and we're on the section talking about desires. And you explained that feeling of saying, oh, everything's great, I'm happy, I'm content. That's me. And I was telling Betty Jo today, I can't make a list of desires because I don't have many. I don't, and she's like, oh, I encourage you to write your list. And I felt some resistance.
Mm-hmm.
You said that might be something historical or where it came from, that it doesn't feel safe for me to you said permission to have it all. Like
Yeah.
that feels very vulnerable to think that. So I don't know what's the question in here, except for maybe a little bit more to the historical piece of like what in some scenarios could be something that caused that.
Sure. Yeah. Oh my gosh, there's so much, right? Like I relate to that. I mean, and really like the way that I look at that, Marcella, is or what I hear in there a little bit. And again, I'm gonna flip this out, may or may not land for you. But what I'm detecting there is could be something around self-worth, right? Like, oh, I have everything that I want, have everything that I need. Who am I to like want anything else? It's like, who are you not to want anything else, right? Like what would it mean if you could have even more than you already have,
Yeah.
right? Like, do you feel worthy? Can you receive that?
Yeah, the worthiness is actually something that got brought up today in our discussion over the desires. And I made the connection in what you were sharing about um my relationship with food is symbolic to the sense of I like to label myself like, oh, I don't eat a lot. Oh, I don't I'm a grazer. I don't like I that's my label. And then I try to stick to like this, I don't need enough, or oh, I'm fine. I don't need a second serving, or I don't, and I play that way with my desires and my goals, and it's just fascinating to see the connection.
Boom.
Yeah.
There it is, right? It's how you relate to so like when we say desire, oh, I love when we first did the desire lesson because people are like, desire, don't say desire. Like, it's we have a just that word can evoke so much stuff, right? Like desire, right? What if I have a desire? But yeah, so that's where those symbolic patterns show up. How you do one thing is how you do everything, right? So how you're, well, I'm a grazer. I only need a little bit. I only need a little bit. Like, how are you doing that with life?
Oof. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Fascinating.
Yeah. Great awareness. Thank you for bringing that forward. That's super common. And I relate to that too.
Yeah. Thank you.
Michelle, there were a couple other questions in the chat, including from May. Can you expand more on the structure of the program?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a 12-week program. Every week there's video lessons. So there's basically 12 weeks of curriculum, although there are a couple of deliberate like break weeks in there. So it basically every week you'd go into your portal, it's all online. There are lessons, there are video lessons, and then there are processes for you to do. You would do the homework, you would do your work, and then you come to your weekly group call, which is a small group of 4 to 5 women. The current groups are facilitated by Betty Jo. And then you'll talk about it's just open sharing and coaching. So you can get support. Maybe you got stuck with one of the processes or you want to unpack and go deeper with what you're trying to learn. And then you've got Betty Jo there to coach you on it. And then the group kind of coaches and supports one another. So it's, the independent work, and then what is it, an hour and a half group call?
1 hour.
A 1 hour group call every week for 12 weeks. And we go through a whole kind of an arc of the journey, right? So we move through topics from mind, body, nutrition, and partnering with your body to we get into pleasure. We have a couple weeks on pleasure. Like, how do you relate to pleasure? How do you relate to desire, as Marcella brought up? Body image. There's a couple weeks on body image. So there's sort of an arc to the journey as you move through. If you think about what I presented today with the body, mind, spirit, we kind of double click into those realms and spend some time in each one.
How do you determine the day and the meeting time? Like, are you just polling everybody's schedules, or how does that work?
That's what I do. In fact, as soon as we have a group together, it's worked out perfectly every time. I offer options and we all come together and figure out what's the day and time that works for everyone. And we do record them as well, so that on the off chance that there's just no way you can attend a session. You can watch the recording. And I can tell you, I'm in week 11 of a 12-week series. And what, Marcella, we've had one person miss one. So, but if it happens, they can absolutely, you can have, anybody, actually everyone has access to the recordings. I coached someone today to go back and listen to their conversation with me. And that's available to you, because sometimes, as many of you know, when you're in conversation and you're getting to something, you just don't even remember what you said. So, so that, yeah, longer answer than the question you gave me, but I thought that was important to add.
Thank you.
That.
Awesome. One more question for you, Michelle, if you have time.
Yeah, I see that. We got one last question. I see that from Rebecca or Becky. How do you suggest reframing the label that one identifies with? Yeah, that's a great question. Well, first of all, I would say first check, listen to the label, right? And notice what happens in your body, right? So like whatever that label might be, if it's like I'm a sugar addict, well, okay. What do you notice in your body? Does your body do you contract? Does that make you feel contracted, or does that make you feel expansive and full of possibility, right? So it's like, just first of all, tracking what's happening in your body, and then reaching for like an adjacent, what's something just adjacent to that maybe feels a little more expansive, right? What's something that I could lean into that makes me feel a little bit more empowered, that we're peeling the self-judgment out of it, right? That's less fixed. Like, I'm a sugar addict is very fixed. I'm learning how to regulate sweetness in my life. I don't know. I mean, right? So it's just like kind of putting on your creative hat and reaching for something adjacent to that label, and eventually calibrating it to something that feels expansive, that makes you feel like, oh, I could lean into that. It's like the difference between motivation and inspiration, right? We can try to motivate ourselves. Motivating is like this pushing energy. I'm going to motivate myself. I'm going to push myself. But unless you've got like a nice strong why or something that's like pulling you forward, you're eventually going to hit some resistance. And motivation can only take you so far. So we're looking for that thing that feels more expansive, more true with a capital T, that's life affirming, right? That's life affirming, that adds more life for all, right? So, and more life for you. So that would be how I would approach that. Hope that helps. What would inspire you instead of what it's like a motivator, like I'm not dissing motivation, but I'm just saying it's half of the story. Okay, great. Well, so thank you guys for bringing your questions. Thank you so much for being here. Again, next step for you, claim your free coaching session with Betty Jo. You will be glad you did. Consider joining Nourished. If it fits for you, we would be delighted to have you. If not, use that time with Betty Jo to figure out what's something else that you can do for yourself that can help you move the needle in a way that that helps you be more nourished, right? This is all about nourishment, body, mind, and spirit. And that's what I want for you. And finally, I'm just going to leave you guys with this cool, I love the word clouds, right? We do the word clouds. This is a word cloud, but some of the words that have come up from the women that have participated in the classes, and like some of the feedback that we've gotten over time, like this is kind of just gives you like a felt sense of like what this journey is about and where it can lead you. And this is something that I just wanted to leave you with, because I think it's fun, and I want this for all of you. So thank you so much for joining us today. It was really wonderful to share space with you all, and we hope to see you inside a productive learning program soon.
Thank you, everyone.